Welcome to Sharkie's Gaming Controllers. I'm Sharkie, and in this video we'll be taking a look at the Cable Guys Master Chief phone and controller holder. So first, let's have a look at this packaging. So straight away you can see Master Chief looking very cool in the packaging there. At the top it's got Halo and Cable Guys logos. Moving down it says Master Chief, the original phone and controller holder. It's got a cool picture there of Master Chief holding an Xbox One controller. And he had also advertised that it includes a 2-meter micro USB charging cable. It also has the Halo Infinite logo. On the side of the box, it just shows the stand as well as how you actually install the controller onto the stand. On the other side, shows some images of Master Chief holding a couple of devices. So you've got Master Chief holding a mobile phone, Xbox One controller, and of course Master Chief holding nothing and just standing there. On the back, once again shows some images of the stand, advertises that charging cable, goes into a little bit of a blurb about the actual charging stand, and also shows some logos. And that's the same on the bottom. So once you've pulled out everything from the packaging, this is what you get. You get the Master Chief controller holder, which looks amazing. Just look at that figure. Looks really nice. And it's a really good size as well. So height-wise, from his helmet down to the bottom of his base, he measures 8.5 inches or 22 centimeters tall. So a very nice size stand. You also get a 2-meter micro USB charging cable. So it's got USB on the one end and then micro USB on the other. So having a look at this holder, it looks absolutely amazing. Master Chief looks like Master Chief. Obviously it's not to scale, they've made it as a controller holder after all, not a statue, but considering what they've made, it looks absolutely stunning. They've added a lot of detail, so you've got the 117 on his chest there, you've got what looks like battle damage to his armor, his helmet. They've added some really nice detail to this figure, so even though it is a controller holder, you could easily put this on display given the amount of detail it has. So taking a closer look, so on his helmet there, you can see the nice detail. You can see like it looks like battle damage on his helmet there. Got the 117 on his chest. He's got his hands outstretched, ready to hold your controller. It is really nice. Very nice armor here in the back. There's some nice detail there. The top, and on the bottom it just has the Cable Guys logo, and the bottom is just a plain black plastic base, but the armor of Master Chief really shows up against it. Looks really nice. So overall, I mean, they've done a really good job detail wise at making this a cool display piece. And they really have done a good job. It really does look great. So now let's have a look at what Master Chief looks like holding controllers. To start with, we'll look at the Xbox One controller, since this is basically the controller that this holder is designed to hold. So slotting in is quite easily. You put it in his arms there and center it, and there we go. He looks pretty awesome. It's something about the Xbox One controller and Master Chief, they just go together, and looks pretty awesome on display. Especially with Master Chief appearing over the controller. Looks pretty cool. Now this is pretty stable, so when you move the controller forward, it's going to fall back against Master Chief's chest. If you bump it sideways though, it might slip in his arms, so that's something to watch out for. It is very slidey when it goes on the sideway, so if you bump it, it might fall off. So it's best to just kind of find a center position and try not to knock it or bump it, and it should be quite stable. Now when charging this controller, you can use the included micro USB cable that this set comes with. And it slots into his arms easily again. And of course the cable actually reaches above there and obscures Master Chief's helmet slightly. Stability is about the same with the cable plugged in. It's still pretty stable moving forwards. but it can still slip sideways. It's a little bit more resistant because the cable sort of hits Master Chief's helmet here, which stops it sliding as much. So now moving on to another controller. Next, we'll do the PS4 controller. So it slots onto his arms pretty easily, and you can center it. It still looks quite nice, even though PS4 controller and Master Chief look a little bit out of place together, but it still looks cool on display. So stability wise, it's not bad. Like forwards, it holds it, but it will slide slightly when you do that, as you can see. But at forwards and back, it does hit his chest. But the thing is, it will also slide at the same time, and this slides a lot more than the Xbox One controller did. So if you are planning to use this with a PS4 controller, just be cautious because it very well easily will fall out of his arms. Now charging it, you can plug the same included micro USB cable in as the Xbox controller. And putting that in, you can still center it quite nicely. The cable does still hit Master Chief's helmet here. But it still looks pretty cool. Stability wise doesn't change much, it still moves forward and back. It does create a little bit of resistance by his helmet, so it won't slide and hit his chest as much, but it can still slide sideways, especially going out this way. So something still to watch out for. It's just not as stable as the Xbox One controller. The next controller we'll look at is the Switch Pro controller. So that slots into his arms quite nicely, and he holds it as well. His helmet still peers over the top, but it does slide straight away, as you can see there. So stability is about the same as the PS4, like forward and back is pretty good, but from side to side it can slide out. It's probably a little bit better than the PS4 because the PS4 really wants to slide out of Master Chief's arms, but this still slides a lot. So again, if you're going to be using this for your Switch Pro, just make sure you don't bump it. Now plugging this into charge, now you can't use the micro USB cable because this is USB-C, but if you have your own USB-C cable, you can sort of plug it in and still use the stand, and it just slots there. And again, the cable does obscure on the helmet there, and as you can see, it does slide a lot from side to side, so just something to be aware of. So stability back and forth is about the same, but again, it does slide. It does have a little bit of resistance on the helmet here where the cable's sort of hitting the helmet, but there's not a huge amount, so this controller is still going to slide. So definitely in terms of controllers, the Xbox One controller is the most stable and probably matches the best, but you can use it with other controllers. You just got to be cautious of not to bump it from the side. Generally, probably just not bump it at all. Find somewhere that's safe to kind of stand it up and just leave it and let it charge. So now that we've seen Master Chief hold some controllers, let's look how he holds some other devices. So to start, we'll try a mobile phone. So it slots into his hands nice and easily. You may have to center it somewhat, but once you've got in position, it looks quite nice and sits quite nicely in his arms. It leans against his helmet there, so it does have a point that it rests against. So it is quite stable. It won't fall forward because, like I mentioned before, it's resting against his helmet, so it has a point to rest. But just like the controllers, it can slide sideways. Now normally I would say don't bump it, put it somewhere where you're not going to hit it. But the thing is, with a phone, you don't want to put this on here and have it fall off and break, especially if you get a text message and the phone vibrates, for instance. That might be enough movement to actually get it to fall off. So while it can hold a phone, if you are going to use a stand for a phone, I would be very cautious, because you can charge it in here. You can just plug the charge cable in there, no problem. and this will fit smaller and larger phones. Larger phones would lean against his helmet, smaller phones may lean against his chest. So while it can be done, it's really a personal preference if you want to risk it, but if you are going to do it, I would be very cautious. Next, we'll try a switch. Now, a switch sits in his arms quite nicely. Again, you may have to just move it and center it because it wants to slide one way, but once you've got it in place, he holds it quite okay. The back of the switch leans against Master Chief's helmet there. Now, stability wise, it's not perfect. He does hold it, and if you look around here, it is leaning against his helmet there, so it's not going to fall forward. But just like the controllers and the phone, this slides sideways. And the Switch, being a much heavier device, kind of wants to slide this way. So I would say that even though Master Chief can hold the Switch, it's probably not recommended. So overall, this is a pretty cool controller stand. Master Chief looks awesome, and the amount of detail they've added is pretty great. Just look at that figure. It looks really cool. So even if you didn't want to use this as a controller stand, you could quite easily put this on display. Master Chief would look amazing on a shelf somewhere. Now, as a controller stand, of course, this isn't ideally used with the Xbox One controller. The Xbox One controller looks great in the stand, and it fits really nicely and is quite stable. You can also use the PS4 and Switch Pro controllers, and probably some other controllers as well, but be aware that they might not fit perfectly, and so as long as you put them somewhere where they're not going to get bumped, you should be fine, but it's still something to keep an eye out for, because if you bump them, they may fall out of the stand. You can also use a mobile phone, but mobile phones can also be quite loose in the stand, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Even though it's supposed to be designed for a phone, I wouldn't say it's safe. Like, if you want to risk it, then just be cautious. Put it somewhere out the way and just hope that the phone doesn't vibrate its way out of the stand. So it is possible, but it's sort of a personal preference if you want to risk it. With a Switch console, you can put it in his arms. It does fit, it does stand quite well, but it's not as stable, and I would say it's not worth the risk at all to use a Switch console with this stand. Now, of course, this also comes with the 2-meter cable, which is quite a nice length, so you don't have to have this right next to your console. So if you wanted to use this for your Xbox One controller, for example, you could put it on your desk, your TV stand, a shelf, at least as long as it's got 2 meters away from where you're plugging the cable in. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility of where you want to place this, so you can find somewhere cool, put your controller on it, and have a cool display piece. So overall, I think it's a great looking stand. It's great for Master Chief fans or collectors, because just look at it, it looks amazing. It looks like Master Chief, even though it's not to scale. So I would say I would recommend this if you're a Master Chief fan and you want something cool to display your Xbox controller. Anyway guys, I hope you liked this video. If you did, then please hit that like button, as it helps out a lot. Feel free to subscribe, as I'll have heaps more gaming controllers and accessories up very shortly. While you're at it, hit that notification button and share this video with your friends. Thanks again for watching guys, I'll see you in the next one.